So the structure of this class is going to be an traditional seminar where Sam and I are going to toss out probing questions and stimulate your conversations, but we wanted to give you a little background on why detective novels started, who started them, where it was. And so we're titling this, You Can't Have a Detective Story Without a Detective. And there's a Frenchman called Francois Vidal. He's a real-life inspiration for Edgar Allan Poe's August Conning, the murder of the Moor. And it's a fascinating guy, absolutely fascinating guy.
That was the first detective story ever.
Really?
When was that?
They're 1841.
Yeah.
There are a few people who wrote in Russian and in Chinese who had a small slight claim of it maybe being before, but nobody in the West has ever heard of it, still hasn't. So we'll go with this, right? So the main thing I'm going to say is that with a single short story, published in a very, plus, right?
Oh, it may have
There we
gone
go.
to
So a
sleep.
single short story published in a very small Philadelphia magazine in 1841, an obscure, little-known writer named Edgar Allan Poe invented a detective story. Poe's amateur detective, Auguste Dupin and on the Rue Morgue, became the model for Sherlock Holmes, Hercule Poirot, an entire school of mystery writers still working today 180 years later. So the question is, why? How did this happen? When Sam and I were first talking about this, I said, to him, why did he write it in Paris? No idea. So I started doing a little research. And the real reason is this guy. Because he published his memoirs between 1824 and 1829, 4 volumes. And he created the very first detective agency in Paris. And it happened because after the Napoleonic Wars, the crime rate in Paris went through the roof, much like the West in this country after the Civil War. You had all these soldiers coming back, no place to work, they needed something. So he created that. He later created the first private detective agency because he was so successful as a detective that the powers that be got angry with it and fired him. So the real amazing thing about this guy is he was first a criminal. He escaped from 20 prisons. And much like Sherlock Holmes, he was a master of disguise. He often dressed as nuns or washerwomen. He could make himself appear smaller, appear taller, and often simply walked out the prison gate. He arrested more than 3,000 people during his time as a policeman. He was the first one to look at forensics, and he actually dug bullets out of bodies and compared them to bullets that were in existing guns. He recognized the importance of fingerprints before there was ink that dried quick enough to use them, and he had a lot of smeared ones that he used, but he introduced that. He created 30,000 index cards on every criminal in Paris, and all the people who worked for him were convicts. He said, took one to no one. He would send them into prison, interview them, what their MOs are. Or he was the really first person to ever come up with scientific method of being a detective. And the amazing thing here is that both Poe and Conan Doyle dissed him on a regular basis. But you can see that he is the model for these people. He's this eccentric guy, strange guy. He's a private citizen. He is, without a doubt, according to him, smarter than any policeman that ever existed. So here's a quote right out of Raymond. You can see this could have been written by Conan Doyle. I don't want to read it to you. Is everybody done? So, when Conan Doyle first started writing about Sherlock Holmes, it was during the period of mass migration from farms to city. If you can think about it, when you lived in a village, you didn't really need a detective because the local constable knew who you were, and most of the crimes were petty or poaching or something like that. It wasn't until people moved into the city that, where you didn't know everybody, you had to form a detective. And can't think of his name right now. The guy who started Scotland Yard brought the doc over there to teach them how to set up a detective agency. And then if we go back to where all these other people are, where the golden age of the English detective story is between the wars. And that's the beginning of the end of the rigid class system in England. Again, social breakdown, needed detectives, and Conan Doyle went from being an obscure doctor to being the most popular writer on the continent. And not shortly thereafter into this country. So the one thing about English crime, the detectives seem to just come from nowhere. I don't know if you watch Poirot or Miss Marple. They're in all these strange places that have no reason to be there. But they have to, they're only really there to solve the problem. And they want to use their extraordinary powers of intellect, intuition, observation to solve those crimes. And then the best part is they gather everyone in a big circle. Tell them how they solve the crime. Point their delicate finger and let somebody else make the arrest. I mean, that has been the model for the English detective story to this day.
It's true.
Then there's the American detective. Actually, neither Chandler nor Hammett had any respect for the English novel. And this is a great line where he wrote that he was trying to get murder away from the upper classes, the weekend house party, and the Vicar's Rose Garden, the backs of the people who were really good at it. And the detective in the American novel isn't really a hero, is he? He's more likely to get beaten up and pistol whipped as he's to solve a crime. He's in the dangerous business. He's more than a little dangerous himself. And what Hammett did was he turned the pulp fiction that was popular in the turn of the century, turned back into the 20th century through the 20s, and mostly done in the Black Mass magazine, to a formula. Just like any sitcom today, they had a formula. Hammett turned it off, turned it on its head, and started writing what most people consider literature, not detective stories. So,
And what's the difference?
I'm sorry?
What is the difference? What leap did he make that made it literature?
The typical Black Mass story is a buxom woman, a nasty man, and another nasty man who goes after the other nasty man, and the woman's in between.
I've never heard.
Hammett, and well, look at Sam Spade. There are women play a part, but they're just a foil. And in the Glass Key, he actually went almost back to the English version, right? Because he's a private not a private man, he's not a detective, and he solves the crime in the Glass Key, but not in the traditional English way. He's getting beat up on a regular basis. And one of the questions we're going to ask is, why would Ned Beaumont put himself through what he put when he only knew Madvick for a year? That's some friendship. But this is what Chandler wrote about the American detective, and it really is. It's down these mean streets a man must go, who's not himself mean, who's neither tarnished nor afraid, and he must be used to rather whether praise a man of honor by instinct, by inevitability, and without thought of it, and certainly without saying it. He's the Gary Cooper, isn't he?
Yeah. It's amazing how much alcohol played a role
Oh,
in the cocktail hour.
I don't know how anybody could drink that much.
No, I
They
mean-
still stand. I
Think about the Thin Man I mean, they drink it
Oh.
2 in the afternoon, 2
From the time he wakes up, he's got.
They always have a cigarette.
Yeah.
And he makes little puns about drinking constantly.
constantly. Alcohol is just part of the.
Yeah.
So I think in the English novel, we have the detective always wants to restore the social order. And the American detective has no interest in it.
No, okay.
No, no. They know they know the dark streets, and they know they're in no position to change them. It doesn't even occur to them. They have a rather cynical view of the world, don't they? The one thing they do have with share with English is they have no use for the police. You know, every cop is a bumbling idiot. And the last sentence in A Long Goodbye is I never saw any of them again except for the cops. No way has yet been invented to say goodbye to them. And that's pretty much their whole attitude about the police. English novels or detective stories, almost everybody has a partner. Sam Spade and Philip Marlowe, they walk down those streets by themselves. And the other thing is they have a code. It's not a code that I necessarily understand. I'm not even sure they fully understand it, but they live by that code. So, the English novel is about justice, restoration of the social order, nothing. And you can skip 90% of an English novel, read the last 10 pages, you've got the book, right? It's all about the norm. So, but what Chandler said, the Black Mask and the American Detective, they were trying to make movies and books, and they wanted to write scenes. And he said, if you did it right, you wouldn't care if you missed the ending. It was all about getting there. So it was the story. And I think this says it all. This Mr. Red Bowlby described Chandler's work as a literary equivalent of a quick punch to the gut. So I'm going to read this one thing, Sam.
All right.
Okay. So I just want to read one thing that, well, I'm going to ask you who you think wrote this. Hammett gave the murder back to the kind of people that committed for reasons, not just to provide a corpse. And with that, the means at hand, not with hand-wrought dueling pistols, curare, and tropical fish. He is said to have lacked heart, yet the story thought the most of, the glass key, is the record of a man's devotion to a friend. He was spare, frugal, and hard-willed, but he did it over and over again, what only the best writers ever do. He wrote scenes that seemed never to have been written before. Want to take a guess? You should be able to get this one.
I read it.
Think of this class.
I read that paragraph on Wikipedia, but I can't remember who wrote it.
Raymond Chandler.
Oh,
I guessed right.
Very like
I was quietly guessing.
cynical and like
Cynical.
own the detective story that he did.
So,
So,
take it from here.
I'm gonna give a little background on Dashiell. So, first of all, he was born in St. Mary's, and he in 1894, and he last term I taught, or rather, I led the discussion on John Barth's floating opera. And after the class, I thought, why not read The Stopweed Factor again? So I read The Stopweed Factor, and there's a Hammett character when he gets to the pre-US colonies, because the book itself is set during, I forget the year, it's 60 and something. But there's a Hammett character in that book. So all of the research that Barth did, he found the Hammett name was very, very early established in Maryland. So that was cool. Next slide. It was first published in the Smart Set. And that was like his trial before he got his black mask. But he wanted to write Smart Set because he was ambitious. And the Smart Set was like the precursor to the New Yorker. Kind of like very highbrow, F. Scott Fitzgerald, that those kind of people were published in the Smart Set. So he very early on, he was an ambitious writer. He wanted to write novels and was kind of disappointed to be published in Next Slide. The Smart Set, or the Black Mask movie. And the first story of his in Black Mask was The Road Home, and that came out in 1922. And next slide. How do we play the
Yeah,
video?
I'll do it from here.
Pulp magazines really started right around the turn of the 19th century. And a very intellectual man named H.L. Mencken started a pulp magazine in 1920 and called it Black Mask. The thing that set Black Mask apart from other magazines was the fact that a couple of really successful writers were working for Black Mask. People like Earl Stanley Gardner, people like Dashiell Hammett, people like Carol John Daly. They were so successful that other writers would look at it and say, I want to be there too, because of the excellence of the work that appeared in the pages. Not just exciting for every reader, but real literary quality. A lot of people think that noir fiction and hard-boiled detective fiction are the same thing. In fact, they are diametrically opposed. There are no heroes in noir fiction. The hard-boiled detective is a hero. He's the gunslinger coming to town to clean it up. He's the good guy and really tough and on the side of righteousness. As Raymond Chandler described him, he's a knight who walks mean streets, but is not himself mean. The creation of the private eye in Black Mask magazine remains the most important development in the history of mystery fiction in America. And many of the most popular writers to this day, people like Mike Connolly and James Lee Burke, have policemen, but they operate like private eyes, all of which came from Black Mask.
Stop the video. Stop the video.
It didn't want to.
And what really set Hammett apart at first was that he was a detective. He worked for the Pinkerton agency and really kind of got like tired of it, got disillusioned by it because they were doing a lot of strike breaking. And that kind of influenced him later when he ended up being chased after by the McCarthyism, the just terrible, excuse me. And he served in World War I as an ambulance driver, but got the Spanish flu. And that stayed with him until the end. So he was a very sickly guy all of his life. And he served in World War II was an old man in the Aleutian Islands off of Alaska. And while he was there, he was in his, mid-50s, I think. So it was amazing that he, was accepted by the army, but that was when he did, until he came back and was chased after the McCarthyites again, and ended up being sent to prison in 1951. And so that's how brief I go. Next slide. And they made the Maltese Falcon twice before the use of Humphrey Bogart in 1942. And so it was the third version that really made a big splash, and that was in 1941. And Dorothy Parker, the New Yorker, from the New Yorker around then, just loved Hammett. And she said that his writing was as American as a sawed-off shotgun. I really like that quote. Next slide. And The Glass Cube was made into a movie in 1942, but it was originally published as it was first serialized by Black Mass in 1930, but it was published as a novel in 1931, and it was dedicated to his lover. That was next slide. Lillian Hellman, who ended up being his lover. I think I started the video that she was his wife, but that was not correct. They were just like partners for a long time.
He was more the model for the Thin Man.
Oh, yeah.
Who was the model for it?
I'm sorry?
Who,
Lillian Hellman?
William Hammett was the model for the.
Yeah, they lived together for about almost 30 years.
Yeah, until his death in
He helped her write her plays. You ever watched the movie Pentimento back about 30 years ago? Well, part of that is their relationship.
Next.
Of course, it was written by Lily Hellman, so we know maybe that it's true.
Yeah. A little biased.
Yeah, well, I have no
Oh,
more.
yeah, that's it.
All right.
So I have a question for you. And those of you who haven't read the book, this is going to be hard to answer. Why do you think Hammett called this book The Glass Key? Well, I'll ask it in another way. Why do you think that whole scene with Janet describing her dream fit the novel?
I didn't get that far. I'm sorry.
Okay,
No.
why?
I don't know, through the whole book, I wondered where the title came from. Right, because you don't really know until the end, if I remember
It
correctly.
doesn't really fit though,
That's-
right?
No,
It doesn't seem like,
it kind of was like, what to make it work for me, anyway.
Yeah. There are all kinds of analysis from people who've read all sorts of things into this. That it was Freudian, that the glass key meant once you opened up the door of knowledge, you could never lock it because the key would shatter.
sounds very academic.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can read all these things
Yeah.
about it. That too much. Some people said it was Hammett's desperate effort to raise himself up to literature. But I just found this out. But the fact of the matter is that the editor of Black Mask was in the habit of giving advances to some of his writers who were starving to death in New York based on a title. And there are some people who knew Hammett at the time who have relayed this story. So we'll say it's 90%. that Hammett needed money, he came up with the title, he got his advance, and he got 3/4 of the way through the novel and had no idea what he was going to do with the glass key, and he just made it up.
That story made me think of, the last line that Bogey says in the Maltese Faggot. Someone asked him what the faggot itself was made from. He said it's made of what dreams are made from. That's from King Lear. It's not from the book. And Bogey ad-libbed that line.
Did he?
Yeah, so it's not in the book. But yeah, that final line, Bogey just ad-libbed it.
So I'm not wrong when I say I didn't think it fit, and I
Yeah.
felt like it was in there.
You could take it out. If you didn't have the title, you could take it out.
Yeah,
You wouldn't lose
and
the thing.
through the whole book, I was like, where's this going? Where's this title coming from? So, I don't
You
know.
could see that you can read into it all you want.
Sure.
And I think the idea of
For
opening
me,
that-
I also felt like, just forget about it shattering, would a glass key even work? It would have to be so exact, and I don't know, I wasn't buying.
And the dream had two endings,
Yeah,
depending on what
so,
Janet wanted.
Sam, I want to go back to something you said. You said Hammett went to prison?
Yeah, for being involved in communism, yeah.
The
McCarthy.
Oh, yeah,
And that's when Lillian Hellman said, I will not cut my conscience to the cloth of the day or something like that. And that you accurate.
I have a question, why is Ned Beaumont always referred to as a full name? He's never Ned or Beaumont, he's always Ned Beaumont. Because that can get a little overdrawn, I would say, reading that over and over, like, Ned Beaumont said this, Ned Beaumont did this. And it seemed repetitive after a while.
I will tell you, in my own family, I have 12 nephews. One of them is Chris. There is no other Chris, but for some reason, we all call him Chris Collins. And when we're talking about him, he's my nephew. Why did we say that? I don't know. It just started and we all fell into it.
Yeah.
So it didn't even bother me that he's always.
Okay.
Do you think it pushes him away a little bit so that you don't get to know him? Do you think Hammett's deliberately setting him apart?
Oh,
I would think so. There's sort of a formality there that it takes away the intimacy.
He's the only one who's always referred to by.
If somebody calls you probably Bruce Purdy versus just Bruce, I mean, there's a little more formality there that separates you from
Yeah, I think that's exactly what he's
being
trying.
casual and informal and personal.
It fits in one of his lines where, I don't believe in anything, but I'm too much of a gambler not to leave a chance. Fits right in there.
I like that.
That's a good line.
It is.
So,
I think he does that to set up an emotional distance from Ned and Beaumont. And I think if you'll notice, the book is not third person omniscient. Therefore, the narrator, the great narrator, never refers to anyone. Like Ned Beaumont never feels bad, He's always his eyes may have been sad, or or something, and it's always like referring to that emotional distance. So it's third person objective, meaning the narrator isn't in any of the characters' heads. You know, it's an observer from a distance, rather than like a lot of Russian novelists write in third person omniscient. Yeah.
So one of the complaints about this book is that it is in the third person and you never know what's in anyone's mind. So it's like real life, you know, I'm talking to you, what you're telling me may not have anything to do with what you're actually thinking, right? I just have to take you at your word. And all through this, there's no internal dialogue. Does it take you away from this story? Is there any part of you that doesn't know who these people are?
I thought that to read it, it felt very vacant.
Very what?
Vacant of emotion and very of sentiment. I just identified, when I was reading it, I identified it as like a male book, you know? It didn't have any softness or it was very hard edged. And I wasn't sure I was gonna be able to finish it. Because I did start to get interested in the story a little bit, but it didn't really engage me because of the lack of the emotional flatness of it, or the absence of.
And what do you mean the absence of emotion?
Emotion. I felt, I mean, of the two books, I much prefer the Chandler. This one, maybe because we're not really getting inside anybody's head. It's hard to really care about them. I didn't like or dislike anyone in this as much as in this. I don't know, I didn't think about it being male versus female, but I did feel like I didn't care so much. And I just wondered, what the hell is wrong with this man that he allows himself to be brutally beaten again and again and again? I mean, there are very few people in this world that I would put myself through that.
You have a few.
I do.
I think it's
Don't
interesting.
ask the names.
It's interesting. I heard from you guys, but that's a very female response to this book.
Well, the females were secondary in a lot of respects in the detective series.
Yeah, and plus
Other than, probably Myrtle Loy was probably equal in the sense with the Thin Man. But I think that the women except for probably a couple of them were very, very secondary in regards to their place in the novel.
yeah, they are secondary. I was really getting more to their response to the characters because these are very male 1920s men. They don't say anything. They're silent. They don't express their emotions, but they're tough and don't take it.
They're cold.
As he says, I can stand anything I gotta stand. That's what that dead moment in the first chapter. So it's interesting that there's that. There is no, oh, how do you feel today?
Another reason why that Raymond is so mysterious, maybe that's a great word, is that he's completely estranged from his past. We don't know anything about him other than he says I'm a politician, designer, and a gambler. So that's all we know about him.
Don't even know where he's from. Every time they ask him, he says, no, he won't tell you.
Right.
And he has a conversation with Chad, the bad guy Chad. And Chad says, it doesn't matter to me where you're from. That's kind of why Chad wants him to work for a while.
Which gives him kind of anonymity or,
Yeah.
in that place.
So, speaking of place, how important is setting in this novel?
Where was it?
Setting.
I told you what I think.
No,
There's a line in here that says, call Hartford 6116. And in 1920, there was a Hartford Exchange in Hartford, Connecticut. It started in Hartford. So I think it took place in Hartford because it's close to New York.
Yeah, go to New York.
It's a small, or maybe it's New Britain or some little more tougher blue collar town.
Well, he says he's going down to New York in the book.
Yeah.
So I figured it was north of New York.
Well, at first I thought it was in Philadelphia, someplace like Allentown, some small town like that. But where else is there when you said call Hartford 6116? So that's what I think it is.
I didn't like trying that detail.
Yeah, I don't think it makes any difference. It's a small town. It's not exactly a college educated town. People are working in factories here somewhere. And Madvig, he got to where he was with both fists working and sometimes both feet, right? That's his line or somewhere. That's the only way I know how to fight, with both feet, both hands going and sometimes both feet.
Matt Big said I pulled you out of a gutter at one point.
You talk about how these men are rather cold and motionless and distant. We just started watching Film Noir, so we're the newcomers here. But what always appeals to me is not only the setting, but the costuming and the men and the way they dress. I mean, they can be sort of blue collar, but they look like they're tailored and polished to some extent. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah.
The costumes, the people in the films,
The hats.
the hat,
men with the hats.
the look. The look is so fabulous.
Who wants to look dapper more than a guy that came up out of wearing jeans and a blue shirt, right?
Right. And I'm just thinking that it's what's so appealing. Of course, the women are sort of sometimes buxom or whatever the word is. They're sort of flashy, but the men are so polished of the era. They're so sort of they've got the suits look custom. They may not be, but they look.
Oh, I think Shad wore custom suits. He had his hair cut every Friday.
And they never look. They might be scruffy and tough and cold, but they, except for the Thin Man series, of course, which is sort of the highbrow.
She was hybrid.
She was, but he was always very polished. She was to the manner born.
In contrast to the dresses, the way the cops and the
The way they always spiff themselves up before they went out or anything. Man, I love that kind of look. I mean, that's what attracted this whole series.
Are you familiar with the movie Miller's Croft by the Coen Brothers? One of the early movies. That's based to a certain extent on the Glass King.
Okay.
That and Red Harvest are both very serious references to the movie. And oh geez, there's another movie too that used that, but the Coen Brothers in particular are notorious for referring to Hammett and Chandler books in their movies. Like it's a Big Lebowski.
Yeah.
That's kind of based on like a Chandler novel, only it's, the dude instead of the dapper.
But the twenties were the Gilded Age.
Yes.
And there's nothing of that, decorative, excessive decoration, clothing, architecture, food, living, food. All of those things that were so enjoyed by,
You know, it's right after World War One, and Europe's devastated. The United States isn't so bad, but there's two groups in the United States in the 20s, right? There's those people who are in the stock market and they're doing well, and they're the Babbitts of the world. And then, as Fitzgerald said, society looks like an amusement park from a distance, all bright and shiny, and you get up close and you see the sweat.
Exactly.
And these guys are writing about the sweat.
The sweat.
it's not written in 1922.
I think it was published then, but when was he writing it? Right?
31. 31 was published in the book.
Oh, so it went.
Yeah, but the 20s were the world got the gangsters all over the place. You got bootleggers running up and down the street. It was a
free
lawless time.
Yeah, and the immigrants, but also women had to stop the right road. And they were free.
As Hammett said, it's never too early to start lying in politics.
That's great.
I'm true to that.
Yes, it took it to heart.
Yes. Some things never change.
Right. Right. It's very fair now.
So what do you think about this friendship between Ed Beaumont and Maverick, where Ed literally puts his life on the line for this guy, gets beaten up, drags himself through a storm, up and down. I mean, I don't think I could have done that in my 30s. I don't know. And then at the end, he tosses it over for a girl. Yeah, a traditional story right there. But for me, I had a hard time, especially when Shad asked Ned Beaumont, see, I'm all call him Ned Beaumont too. How long do you know Maverick? How long do you know Paul? And he said, a year.
Yeah.
A year. Been in town about 18 months. We've been friends for a year. So why do you put up with that for a year? And why does this? And he chastises Paul constantly for going after Janet Henry. But the second that Janet Henry goes, hey, he's right there. And do you think that relationship lasted?
No. I questioned it all the way through. I almost felt, is there something underlying? Is there another reason? Besides this so-called friendship that it came out?
There's a hint where he
There's
said,
a lot about the family, like mom character, that big mom.
Okay, so.
but I think that was the same thing that you had there. There was a hint where he said, Paul dragged me out of the gutter.
Okay, I think
And
that
then he was invited into his family somehow.
debt was repaid, Oh, yeah, the relationship with his mother.
His mother and the daughter.
And the sister.
Sister, yeah, sorry.
No, daughter.
No.
Sister or daughter?
thought it was
I
his
think you're right. I think
Yeah,
it was his
I'm
daughter.
pretty sure
Yeah, it
it's
was his
not
daughter.
Big's daughter.
Should have written that one down.
Yeah,
Next class.
I think so. I think you're right. Yeah.
Are these moral people?
They're ambitious. Or at least Paul is. That's his motivation for trying to get in with the senator. There are these more.
I think a lot of men have a moral code. They don't necessarily understand what that code is, and they can't necessarily explain it, but they'll follow it. And I think these guys, if you ask them, they would say, yeah, I'm a moral person. I do what's necessary. I fight evil with evil, but only because it's necessary.
And they're not quite lawful, or at least Ned Beaumont isn't quite lawful. He's not quite a criminal either.
No.
Somewhere in between, like really skirting that line. So what is Ned's job? What does Ned do?
I think he's Michael Cullen. He's a fixer. He's the fixer. Because it really is. It's he is so much smarter than Paul, right? He sees the bigger picture. Paul just sees.
Yeah.
I gotta get in there.
It's kind of scrappy. It's kind of scrappy.
No, I mean, he's all. I started to think he was based on Hammett himself, maybe tubercular, because they're always talking about his caved-in chest, and then he runs out of juice a lot easily. Even though he managed to get out of it.
Yeah.
But I forgot where we're going with that. But he's the brains, right? And he's trying to bring this guy into the early 20th century instead of being a small town Fifth Ward guy.
Was Paul an attorney?
I think Paul is just a guy that came up out of a union somewhere, an enforcer.
Okay. But they were meeting, the first meeting was at the district attorney's office. It's
Yeah, it was-
graduating.
State attorney lives right there, right? District attorney.
Yeah.
One of the things he said was the key to power is not knowing everything, but controlling the information. So that's a very sophisticated small town.
And you, Chandler, has a great book about the book.
Which one?
I've got it right here. If you can read it. Yeah, that's Chandler review, the last one.
Hammett has done something extraordinarily new to the murder and mystery story. He has made the reader as much interested in the relation of his individuals to each other as in the solution of the story, a curious, intriguing character whom any novelist would have been proud to conceive. And Raymond Chandler found an effect of movement, intrigue, cross purposes, and the gradual elucidation of character, which is all the detective story has any right to be anyway. All the rest is Spilkins in the poem.
So that was Chandler's idea of what the Glass Key did. He really admired that it kind of bent the genre by using that. It's not a detective. He comes on kind of inadvertently. But that's why I asked earlier, what is Ned's job besides being a politician like a Ron? He identifies himself as a gambler, and that he needs to win to prop up himself. Like being on a winning streak is like his kryptonite. No, not anti-kryptonite. What am I thinking of? But it seems to me that. Oh, you got it? All right.
No, it's okay, Sam. Just kidding you. So, at the end of this book, has the moral order been restored, or is it just kept right on the wall? Was there any moral order in this town?
Not that I saw.
So it's a true American detective story, right? We're not working, don't care what happens.
Do you think if anyone cares what happens? Everyone just wants to come out on top.
It's true.
Yeah, there isn't a lot of resolution though at all.
No, there's not. I think I told you the other day, well, that I had a problem with it from the get-go. I wanted to know where am I?
Yeah,
What
it does
city
start,
am
but
I
it,
in, or what
You should have read it
town,
more
or
carefully, you would have known.
I would have seen that exchange, but I was trying to.
what is the
It's not
phrase?
New York. I know it's not New
Medium
York. It's
rare,
not San Francisco.
medium res, the,
Um, But
starting,
if you look at his earlier works, like the Continental Album, Grain Curse, you don't know where you are, Poison. You don't know where you are.
Ever?
You don't know what's going on there.
Is
This
that,
underworld, nasty place, this guy's gonna set right in the,
is there a reason for that?
if it was Chandler, I would say it's because of what Long Beach, California was in the 30s and 40s and 50s. Which was one nasty place for gambling rules and the police were corrupt. I don't know, Hammett's writing in San Francisco in the 20s was a pretty rough place. Had all those sailboats coming, cargo boats coming in. You don't want to walk down some of those streets. So that's the only thing I can think of, is that they're reflecting what they saw around them.
well, at the time, San Francisco was largely being rebuilt after the earthquake in 1906. Well, but like even the Lombard, the really iconic street was being redone then. So San Francisco then doesn't at all look like San Francisco now.
There a point somewhere early on in the first third, where Paul and Ned are, Ned is saying something like, I'm gonna leave New York. There was a discussion briefly of the location of where they were, and Ned was saying, I think I'm gonna leave New York, and Paul was saying, you can't do what we can do here if you go somewhere else. Is that New York?
Well, he went to New York, he took the train to New York a few times, I think.
Chase that gambler.
But it never said where he was coming from.
Yeah. Is it jarring to, because we don't know anything about Ned, or nothing is really told to us about Ned. And unlike Sam Spade or Philip Marlowe or the Continental Album, that have kind of a history, like we know where they are, who they are, and where they've come from. But we don't know anything about Ned, and we hit the ground running. Yes, and the French phrase for that is medium res. And medium res.
Medium res.
Yeah, and we don't know. And that's a mystery.
And it remains.
Yeah.
So I think for me, that made me care less about
Okay.
it. You know, if you want me to care about you, I need to know who you are. And I don't know.
You never cared about anybody in that book, right?
No.
Did you appreciate the prose?
Oh, sure. But I didn't get lost. I like to get lost. I like to really care about people. I want to know they're going to be okay, or I want to know that they're going to be gone. And it didn't do that for me.
I think that's why readership of The Last Mask was 98% men.
It did feel well.
So what I'd like you to think about for next week is a couple themes between the two books. One is how they treat corruption and power, and loyalty and betrayal.
And that quote that Will read from, try to imagine that glass key is influencing the long goodbye, like influencing Chandler to write long goodbye. Because the first version of that book was called something else. I'll bring that quote next week. But Chandler wanted to write something like Glassy, and the first version was not Marlowe, was in the third person, a different character. So Chandler couldn't even break out of his own milieu that he inspired.
It's hard to write in third person.
That's true, it is.
So the other thing is, think about that thin line between good and evil between the two books, and the fragility of relationships. This is both books are about friendship, and redemption and forgiveness. See it, how they how each author treats each other so nice.
Well, I wanted to apologize to you guys. We misread the course and we thought it was going to be sort of a discussion of just film noir. We looked at it and went, oh, film noir. We didn't dig into it, and that's why we didn't. We'll read it next week, okay?
Okay.
But sorry about that.
Already ruined it for
No, it's okay. No. We just we both looked at each other and said, "Oh, yeah, we're getting really interested in this. That's a good one to sign up for." And then we never looked further, and that's we just signed up and said, "Oh yeah," and then we just came today. So my apologies that we didn't read the book.
Well, we got a lot of reading in next week.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.